And I think that the willingness to not be afraid to commit to complete a complete level of unknown at a young age. So look, if in 2 or 3 years time I have a kid and, things change in terms of my options and what I can do. But I think that that's part of life. At 19, 20, 21, 22, at 26, I think that there still has to be that level of, like, I'm going to commit to something that just doesn't make sense.
Welcome to the Path Distilled, everybody. I'm Kevin Harris.
Hello, everybody. Lauren Tashman. Really excited that today we have on the show performance and movement specialist at Golf and Body NYC, Matt Palazzolo. Matt, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself before we get started here?
Yeah, so I work in Manhattan, New York, at a studio called Golf and Body NYC. I specialize in performance and movement as it pertains to golf and just overall function. So a little bit about what I do there. We have a relatively large studio with hitting bays and a wellness area, as well as a performance area. And our main focus there is to facilitate the team approach towards overall performance training for golfers and athletes alike. Majority of our clientele base are golfers. So that's what I specialize in now. I worked 2 years prior at a junior academy down in Florida, where obviously I was specializing in golf there as well. And then prior to that, I was working at just some other performance studios and training studios in different areas of the country. I was in Arizona for a year. I was in Buffalo for a year. I was in Florida for 2 and probably actually 3 years, just split up over the course of 5 years. Really the last 2.5 to 3 years has been pretty heavy with golf. So, the overall, I guess, aspect of my training is just purely maybe pejoratively labeled functional. But I did begin to cater that the past few years to golf. And it's been something that's been really eye-opening just because of the complexity of the movement and the inefficiencies that are there, but the ability to perform at a high level with those inefficiencies. I think it's something you don't see in many other sports. I think most sports, if you're a sprinter and you can't get off the block efficiently, you can't sprint. But if you're a golfer and you have that ability to get up and down, but maybe your swing isn't that pretty, or you have the most amazing swing in the world, but you can't putt, but you can still get up. Like there's just a lot of different nuances that allow people to function within it. So I think that there's a lot of room for someone like myself to be able to come in and optimize people that are, maybe a +2, and some people that struggle to break 90. So it's a very unique field and something that I've come to really learn to love and enjoy pretty heavily.
Awesome.
Nice.
Why don't you start by just having us kind of wind back to the beginning of how did you get into this?
Yeah, so when I was a junior in high school, I went and got a basic just personal training certification. And it was something that was interesting because, prior to that, I'd always worked in pretty active fields. Like I was a lifeguard. I grew up in New Jersey. So I was a lifeguard in the winter at a pool, like indoor pool, even throughout the summer for a little bit as well. And when I'd gotten certified, I don't know if you guys are getting a lot of feedback. I think this AirPod might be dying. Just let me know.
I'm not getting
if it's coming in a little. I appreciate that. But so picked up my certification for personal training, and I did that as an internship and at the end of my school day. So high school was a little bit like we had a block scheduling, and my junior and senior year I did an early out program. So I would leave, I would go to college and take college courses, and then I would go and work in the evenings, and then I would work in the morning, and then I intern in the morning, and then I would go. So I had gotten into training when I was pretty young. I went out to Arizona for about a year when I was around 2021, about a year and a half about, and the training there was a little bit different. So prior to that, I was used to a lot of the one-on-one training. Arizona was more of a higher end private training studio, but it was really unique because if you were to walk into like a group training facility in most other places, people are doing like, body weight squats and maybe push-ups and working with some arbitrary pieces of equipment. But what we did that was really unique out there was we were working with just a gen pop. So it was not a high-end athlete background. If anything, we call the majority of our members and clients like executive athletes. A lot of like CEOs and stuff like that, but they love to get out, work with barbells, kettlebells, things like that. So, we would have classes solo coached of 20, 25 people sometimes, and people are doing barbell cleans, kettlebell swings, they're doing some more high-end athletic exercises. So it really built this appreciation for me towards like just more quality training instead of just how many people can we throw in a room and get them to sweat. It was more like, it was more high-end from that perspective, where the training was more specific. And I really, really fell in love with that. So that's where I picked up out in Scottsdale. I picked up my certification with Nike for golf performance. I only had one client in Arizona that was a golfer, which is disingenuous to Arizona because the golfing community is huge out there. But just for me at the time and what our studio marketed towards, I didn't have that many golfers. But I remember when I was working with him, it was something that even at that time, back in 2013, 14, I just loved. So from there,
hold on, I'm going to pause you there for a second.
Yeah.
Wind back, you said you got into training early. Like how early? What age do you remember being when you got involved?
Training someone else, 16.
Okay. What about yourself?
I think it was training myself. My dad had a little gym in the basement. So, I mean, I was probably down there working out with him when I was like 10. And I don't have like an exact time, but I remember I was young. And again, it was like, my dad was, and I think that this has been beneficial for me, but my dad was very old school with his workouts. Mm-hmm. We're talking like push-ups, bench press, lat pull down, bicep curls, like nothing groundbreaking, kind of like an old school style of training, but that's what we had in the basement. So yeah, I started really, really young with that.
Okay. And then you mentioned in Arizona, you kind of developed this love for golf training. What did you love about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think so. The Nike certification was through this institute called the Gray Institute. So Gary Gray is more of a functional based training philosopher, and his style of training is more catered to that. So when I picked up the cert, it was I think a 5 or 6 month course online, and then you had to do a 3-day seminar to kind of cap it off. So before I went to Arizona, I had already finished the online stuff. It just so happened to be that the job that I wanted to kind of pick up and go take was in Arizona, and that's where I had to finish the certification as well. So when I came in, I had, about 90% of any of the information I was going to get from the course already like in my brain. So when I started at the studio in Arizona, I was approaching the movements there that we were doing. Again, complex, but nothing outside of like what we would call more of your like bilateral, sagittal, like one-dimensional athletes, right? Like we weren't working much rotation based drills. It was a lot of just single plane movement, but complex. But I was looking at it already from the perspective of golf and the stuff that we learned in the certification course. So to your point, what interested me the most in golf was the complexity of the movement, and seeing that like breaking down like a barbell clean is not easy. There are some people that make careers out of doing that, and they should, because there's a lot of, especially when you're trying to move 2 to 3 times your body weight, right? That stuff's really complex. But for me at the time, it wasn't what resonated with me. Like I wanted to understand 3-dimensional movement more. I wanted to understand, how does a body react to a moving object? And then how does that object react to that body? And can you from a performance standpoint and a movement standpoint train that? Which is something that, as you know, Lauren, is like, I think probably the biggest thing that I guess the gap that I kind of like to fill at Golf and Body, which is, we have great coaches and they know what they're doing, but some people just like, it's just movement. Like the people they're working with just need to understand the movement. It's not like, hey, you know, feel your hands get low and the face path from inside to out. And it's like, as important as that is, there's still something breaking in the connection from object to movement that I like to try and fill that void. So that was kind of the kicker for me in Arizona. Was I was like, yeah, like this is good. And when I had that one client that was like all golf, I was like, I want more people that are doing this.
Okay. And then,
yeah.
So what came next after Arizona?
So Arizona was, when I left there, I went to Florida, and I actually completely went the opposite way. Arizona was a great experience for me professionally, but in terms of my respect towards the industry, I was like, I don't want to just be like a trainer. Like this, like to me, to come in and have to, you know, at that stage in my career, I had to probably do, you know, 6 sessions a day, six group sessions a day, plus another 3 to 4 personal training sessions a day to make a kind of decent living as a single dude who's like 20, 21. But I knew it wasn't going to be good as someone who was going to be married and had kids and a family. So I was like, I want to stay in the field, but I want to look into more of a lead role. So when I took the job in Florida, I took a position as a head trainer for an outdoor boot camp. Had nothing to do with golf. Had nothing to do with anything along the stuff that we were even doing. If anything, it was the polar opposite to what I was just talking about. It wasn't high end functional, right? We're working with people that are there purely for weight loss. And what I loved about it was I had 2 trainers that were part of my team, and then I had 3 interns that we would cycle through. So there was a lot of me getting to coach other trainers, which is something that I had always wanted to do, even in Arizona. Mm-hmm. And this was a good opportunity for that. So, you know, the head position allowed me to program design, allowed me to work with other trainers and interns. And even then I still found a way, like we introduced a kettlebell specific class. So I would have one of my coaches work with a group of members that wanted to work in just generic weight loss and just HIIT training and cardio. And then I was working with the same mindset, but just kettlebell only. So it was a kettlebell only workshop. And that blossomed into something that I loved as well. So that was kind of the next step. And it was good because of the lead role. But again, like I lost complete interest in just wanting to be a trainer. That just wasn't there at that stage.
And I have a question, if I might jump in here. So during that time period, were you equally looking at ways to improve your ability to learn new ways of training during that time as you were trying to improve the performance of your clients?
Yeah. If anything, I was more motivated. If anything, I was more motivated then to go home and read and study about stuff that was not applicable to my immediate clientele than any other point prior. I was more because I wasn't in it. Like I felt when I was in Arizona, like I had, and there was a lot of conflict within the community of the work culture, but I had 2 or 3, maybe 4 coaches where I could sit down and just nerd out like at lunch. Like we would have books out and we'd be pulling up video. Like there's all the stuff that we were doing. That was not the case in Florida. So I was more motivated to go home and do that because I think for 8 hours a day, I wasn't actually physically present in that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, right? I was thinking about that too, Kevin, right? Like you can already hear in your story like this balancing of, I mean, I've got to work, right? Like pay the bills, make money, try and build a career, but also that searching for the things that truly motivate you and the things that you're interested in.
Right. Yeah. So from there, that trend continued. When I was I left that job and I had a little bit of a gap, and the way that job ended, when I was done with it, I was like, I don't want anything to do with fitness. I don't want anything to do with the industry. You know, if anything, I may study it for myself, but I'm going to get out. So I took a little bit of a break, and I actually spent the next 8 months going through a hiring process to take a position out in Arizona to work with Border Patrol. So I was done with the industry. I I had gone through the hiring process for that's pretty extensive because there are a lot of interviews, background checks, things like that. So basically, you know, my parents lived in Florida. When I was working for this job prior, I was about an hour away from them in Florida, but about an hour away from them. Now I moved back in with them. I'm running every day. I'm training every day, just getting ready for Border Patrol. I go through the interviewing process. I finish up the process. I take the polygraph and I fail the polygraph. And for whatever reason,
what did you lie about?
No, yeah, he pointed it out, made it very obvious. I was lying about drug abuse and things along the lines of like arson and other illegal acts that I just apparently I couldn't. I you know, I don't know. So
Misspent youth coming to haunt you.
Yeah, I guess. And it was funny because, you know, when I was going through the process, like I've never done, I don't know if you guys ever done a polygraph?
I've seen them. I did an internship in a prison when I was in college, so I've seen them and seen things like that. Yeah.
There's nothing comfortable about a polygraph. Like so I'm sitting on motion sensors. I have motion sensors on my ankle. It sounds bad, but it's not this bad. They have a chain around my chest that has a motion sensor. I have a blood pressure cuff that sits on me at like, so like if you go to the doctor and they take your blood pressure, it's like uncomfortable for 10 seconds, but he had it on me for 5 minutes. So like I'm losing feeling in it was horrible. And when I didn't pass that, I went and I spoke with, like, I have a guy that works now, a buddy of mine who's a Port Authority cop, and other people that have had to do this stuff. And they completely admitted, they said a lot of the polygraph testers they're just not good, and it has an effect on a lot of people, because he was like, first off, even if it was going to take him another two hours to test you, he was only supposed to leave the cuff on for no more than 60 seconds, because I'm losing feeling in my finger, and it's on, you know what I mean, like there was nothing comfortable about it. And he was like, you drew the short end of the stick. So after that process and that had happened, I had met my fiance in Florida. She was taking an internship, a professional internship with Disney, and doing the college program and all that stuff. So then we decided to move up to Buffalo, because that's where she grew up. She was done with her internship. I obviously wasn't working in Florida. I was just about to start working. It only been about a month since the whole polygraph, the Border Patrol thing. So I was going to start working for a company called Orange Theory, as a studio manager, and rather as a head trainer, with the intent of becoming a studio manager down in Florida. That guy happened to know someone who was opening a location. The general manager knew someone that was opening a location up in Buffalo, did the interview over the phone, went up, took the job. And my goal now was to work, front end, and then into being an assistant studio manager. And I wanted to be a studio manager from there, because I didn't want to train again.
Was that not wanting to train, was that burnout or something else?
You cut out, say burnout?
Yeah, was you not wanting to train, was that burnout or something else?
I think it was, so Florida and Arizona, the pay wasn't the best, and it was the model that I think is not successful for a lot of trainers who are passionate, which was, like you're gonna try to hit quotas, and you're gonna build, like, it felt too salesy. I felt way too salesy in both those positions. So I was like, I'm just gonna go out and coach people, do the best that I can, but I'm not gonna sit here and cold call. Like I can't wear both those hats successfully. Because then when I'm training somebody, all I'm thinking about is selling them on the next session. Like I can't, like I needed to be separate from that. So the intent, it wasn't burnout. It was, I felt, and it's not like Orange Theory paid well for their managers, but like I felt that I could have earned a higher living just being a manager and then maybe picking up clients on the side than focusing on being a trainer, and just hoping that, if I fill my book, and if my classes are filled up, that I'll be able to pay rent.
So you've got almost what sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds almost like you've got this competing motivation of wanting to make money and make a living, but also wanting that kind of intrinsically motivated feel of just doing something you love doing.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, whether knowing me or not, you know, I've always been very, like, just a very recalcitrant individual. Like I've never done well with authority. I haven't. And it's weird because like I never bucked up against my parents, never bucked up against like my friends' parents. Like I never had that problem. But when it came to just like this feeling of teachers and school and the feeling of certain managers and other positions that I've had who had they didn't understand the depth of training at the level that I felt I did, but it was about the business model to them. So it wasn't about the quality of the trainer. It was just simply about their ability to sell. That's when it's like if I jump on Instagram, right? I'll always struggle to compete with the accounts of the people who know how to make their fitness pages look cool and the music's there and it's edited well, but I can look at it from my eye and be like, that the form's horrible. Like it doesn't, like the quality's not there, but they can market it. So like that I've always struggled with. So when I had taken the front end position with Orange Theory, I, again, now trying to get it to this higher level, right? I'm trying to achieve this higher level. I'm seeing that it's still a very salesy process. It's still a very, like, doesn't really matter what you know. It's just, you got to make the sale, right? You got to close. And then if you want to be a manager, you'll be a manager. So I bit the bullet, just sat there for as long as I could while looking for other jobs. And then I found a weight loss training facility in Buffalo that paid better in terms of the hourly rate. It was better pay. And I went back, I just bit the bullet and I went back to training. They got I went in, and the process was you'd take a class, you'd work out, you'd meet the COO, and he was big enough where he had 4 or 5 locations. And I got wrapped back into the training again because I wanted to be, they had an option to be a head trainer and to work your way up. And the guy who owned the company who's doing, just, he's not doing well now for reasons that are reflective of who he is as a person. But at the time he had these big goals. I want to franchise, I want to grow, he played it off that he appreciated like my knowledge and perspective on programming and leading other trainers. So it was, when we franchise and we're opening up hundreds of locations, you're going to be part of a franchise team. You'll go to the locations, you'll train the trainers there, you'll get them ready, train them in our model, all that other stuff. So I was super interested. So I got in. I didn't like the training. I loved the people I got to train. The members were great, but I didn't like the training because, it wasn't, again, what I wanted. I don't want to be training weight loss. I don't want to be training, this model was different. We would sometimes have 45 people in a class with 2 coaches. So that was fun. Being able to riff with another coach was awesome. And being able to run the room with another coach was awesome. That end of it was fantastic. And I've made some, what I feel are lifelong friends from that environment. But again, we didn't foster that friendship. That growth wasn't fostered on like our knowledge and passion for coaching. It was actually fostered on our disgust and disdain towards the guy who was running the facility, because a lot of us were working. I mean, I was working, like I lived in Tonawanda. You guys don't know anything about the Buffalo. Maybe you do, but I lived in Tonawanda, and East Aurora was about an hour away from me, but I was doing that shift in the winter. So I'm up at 3:30 in the morning shoveling out my truck, and then I'm driving. I'm getting there for 5:30 class. I'm coaching 5 classes. I'm driving back to Tonawanda to work a split because it's the only thing I could do to make money. So now I'm working a split. The split ends at 10 o'clock. I'm going to bed by 12 and I'm doing it again the next. Like it was horrible for my health. And a lot of it had to do with this guy's management style and the way that, like, he was like, well, when I was building it up, I was grinding and I was doing, all of this. Like, you guys have to do it too if you want to be successful. So again, it built a lot of hatred towards the industry. I'm like, I don't want to work my way up if this is, and I know I went on a little bit of a rant, so I apologize about that. But like, it was just, I had no interest at all in the industry at the most after that.
Okay.
Yet you were trying to stay in it, or you just felt like at that point you had to?
Well, I had to, because it was the only way I could eat. So that was kind of like the mindset then. But once the lease was up on my apartment, Melissa and I looked at moving back down to Florida because she was thinking about working for Disney again anyway. And I was like, we'll go back down. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of at this point where my resume was. So I was still looking in the field, but yeah.
So what was the next event?
So I found a startup in Ocala that had an interesting business model. It was one that I thought was going to do well. So moved down to Florida. My parents, where they lived, was about 40 minutes from Ocala. So we moved in with them just for about 2-3 months while we were waiting to get an apartment. Took the job out there. We were about to pull the trigger on an apartment in Ocala, and then he went under. He was like, he didn't have the funding, couldn't get the people in. So for about a month, we kind of sat in the void. She was still working, I was still looking, and then that's when I found the academy, the junior academy, and then that's where I was for about 2 years.
So, what was it? How was the experience with the academy? Did that start striking the boxes you were looking for?
Yeah. So when I had gone on there, and it was really good too, because on paper I wasn't qualified for the position, but like by any means I wasn't qualified for the position. They were looking for a strength and conditioning coach for golf, and their director of fitness had just left for a personal reason. So when I came on and I interviewed for that, and I told them a little bit more about the functional stuff, and again, all of the stuff that I had been kind of studying and researching, because even in Buffalo, it was the same thing. I hated going and coaching, but I would still go home and read. Like I had to, because if I didn't, I felt like I was going to get stuck, and then I was going to be stuck doing that for the rest of my life. So I was like, I want to keep trying to get ahead of that. So it resonated with the director of instruction. They offered me the position. I took it. Within a few weeks, we got an apartment down by where the academy was. And yeah, I mean, really for the next year and a half, it was, the work environment was hectic, but I was loving what I was doing and who I was working with. And I had always had the juxtaposition of what I had to do in Buffalo. Like if I had, we had to work tournaments, as Lauren's probably aware for her experience in junior golf. And the tournaments are not like, they're 18-hour weekends for me and the coaches. Like they're not easy. We're usually driving the students. And there were a lot of flaws in the academy, especially that academy, in terms of the hierarchy of who did what and the task orientation of who was supposed to do what. And at the end of the day, it always fell on the shoulders of the coaches and myself and as on the performance staff, which created a strong community. But yeah, I mean, it was what I wanted to be doing, and I loved it. So the hours weren't bad. And then he sold the academy to another academy. And when the academies essentially merged, that's when I realized I was kind of back in the environment again, where I'm like, I don't want to work for this person.
Can you tell us a little bit about what a day looked like, particularly when it was good? What did you do? What did your everyday or routine look like at that point?
Yeah. So we had, we would run full-time students, we would run short-time students, and then we would run postgraduate students. So I had the postgrads every day. They were the kids that are out of high school, but usually foreigners that had, from other countries that would take a gap year, and they would come and they would train because they would want to potentially get into a higher division college in America. But every day I would work with them from 8 to 9 in the morning. We would have the campers or the short timers from usually 9 to about 12. And then from 1:30 to about 6, we would have the full-time students 5 days a week. Saturdays were optional on my end. If I wanted to go in and earn a little extra, I could go in and take some private lessons unless we had a tournament. And then I would be given usually 2 tournaments a month. And the tournaments were, you'd get up 5:30, you'd drive the kids to the tournament. On my end, I would help warm them up, stretch, movements, whatever, to get them ready to play. And then I would just follow them around, give them some encouragement, just be a physical presence for them while they were playing in the tournament, drive them home. And then that was it. So it was training all day from usually 7:30, 7:45 in the morning till about 6 o'clock at night, 5 days a week. So it was good. It was a good environment.
What did you love about that?
It was specific to one thing, and it was golf. It was, Well, the most important thing was for the first time, I actually had autonomy. So like the programming I could develop, the training was, I had two guys that were part-time assistants. So again, it was the same thing. I could develop the program. I could sit down with them and go over it. And they were great. There was no ego amongst the three of us. We were very focused on just quality training and a good product. So, I was able to offer that, and it was just very like, I had to match the owner's goals and objectives, which were never clear cut. And you never had any idea what he wanted to do ever. But the director of instruction was very precise in his process. So he and I, as well as the director of mental performance there, we would have a lot of, usually once or twice a week, sit down and just mastermind for 20 minutes. Because it was always hectic. There were always private lessons being thrown in. And I never took lunch because I was usually given someone to train at 12, or I'd be training them at 1. It was all over the place. So the actual structure was not efficient at all. And I don't know if that's anything you can attest to with other academies, but it was chaotic. But actually I found from that I thrive in a form of controlled chaos. I kind of like having randomness throughout the day. If it's happening in my workday, I kind of like it.
Did it feel good to have the things that you've been reading about? Did it feel good to finally put the rubber to the road, as they say?
Yeah, completely. I felt like everything was kind of, again, there was always the grass is greener, where it's like, okay, we didn't have a facility, so everything we did was outside. And in Florida in summer, it's freaking brutal. So
Yes,
you're limited with some of the stuff you can do.
Sure.
But I was still, I had the things that I needed. I would have loved an indoor facility with an impact wall and barbells and like everything that but I didn't have that, but I still had more because I was able I was able to at least do the things that I had been looking at and learning and studying for the past, what I felt were 4 or 5 years.
And would you say that it was a really good feeling, or how would you describe seeing progress based on the things that you had created as far as training?
It was euphoric for me. The days went by really fast. Even now I struggle to feel complacent and comfortable. But at that point, when I pinned it up against the rest of my career, I felt very comfortable. Like I knew there was still more I wanted to do, and I didn't want to be doing that for the next 5 years. But I was like, okay, like now I can kind of see the path of the trajectory of my career starting to kind of make sense.
At that point, how many years into your career were you about?
So that would have been 26. So 6 years, probably 6 years.
So you're feeling good about kind of where you've been thus far. Are you feeling like an expert at that point? Are you feeling confident?
I think I was definitely feeling confident in my ability to do what I was doing in that field. I don't know if I'll ever feel a level of mastery at all. So I definitely, if I'm not feeling it now, I was not feeling it then for sure. But I felt comfortable in what I was doing without a doubt for the first time in probably 6 years at that point. Yeah.
Okay. And so from there, tell us kind of the next part of the story.
So the academies kind of, they merged, and we moved locations. We doubled the student base, effectively doubling the staff. And once we got into that new environment, I knew within just a couple of days of meeting the staff and just being present there that it was not appreciative. Like the guys that I worked for and with at the academy prior to the merger were very themselves, but were very appreciative and respectful towards growth. So they wanted to see someone get better. They wanted to learn, right? We wanted to, when we could, we wanted to sit down and talk about what we were working on and how we can make one student better. And we were all, performance staff and the mental staff were monitoring during busy weeks and busy months, close to 75 students, 80 students a week. The coaches were, with the exception of the director of instruction, were monitoring the 8 to 10 in their group. But there was always that ability to focus on one kid. This is what we're gonna do is one kid. And that was good to see. When I got to the other location, that was gone. No one really wanted to talk much about integration and looking at the team approach. I mean, me, the coach, and it was arbitrary compared to what we get now over at Golf and Body, but I handled the medical as well for the academy. And at the first academy, you could sit down and you could talk as a team. And then when we merged, it was silo. Performance does performance, and mental does mental, and golf does golf, and medical does medical. And you don't really waste your time collectively collaborating as a team. It was kind of the thought process of, if everyone does their job without thinking of other people, and we're all good at our job, the kids should just get better. And once I had seen that, I was like, I can't do this. So within a week of being there, I was on Indeed and Instagram and just LinkedIn and looking for jobs anywhere. I told, Melissa wasn't thrilled with what she was doing for work. She worked for an awesome person, but she wasn't loving it. I said, if we can look at other places, let's look at other places. And I came across Golf and Body, and that was kind of the next step.
So as someone who loves culture and works on culture, I hear this element of that throughout your story and throughout your kind of career. This might sound like a dumb question, but what do you like about that collaboration? Like what is that? It sounds like that's something that you really like having in the work that you're doing. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's when you're in the right place and you're working with the right people, there's always going to be an ego, but when you're working with the right people and you're collaborating on simply getting that one person better, it feels like there's a very, diminished aspect of that ego. Like the ego, it feels like there's one ego, and the one ego is to say that we're the best team. Like that's the vibe that I get. Is it's like, you can look at the academy now, and if you were to go in there and you were to go up to a coach and you were to say, what's the best part of this place? And they would say, the golfing's good. Or if you go up to a student, they may say, the food's not bad, right? But when we were at the academy prior to the merger, people would come in, like parents would bring their students in, and they were coming from behemoths like IMG and Ledbetter, right? Mm-hmm. Places that looked beautiful. I mean, you walk in, you're like, okay, it makes sense that we're going to pay $130,000 a year to send our kid here. You'd come to us. I mean, we're on the back of a range. Like we don't have equipment. I have kids hitting tires with sledgehammers and picking up like rusty weights, but the parents would leave and they would be like, well, I felt like it was a team. Like when my kid was being screened by the director of instruction, you had the mental coach there, you had an assistant golf coach there, and you had the performance coach or one of the performance coaches there. And it felt like everyone was going to help that student get better. So I think collectively as a culture, the thing that matters to me the most is like if I built a company and I was fostering a work environment and I was trying to sell someone on giving me, their time and money to take part in my services, I'd want them to say, you guys are one of the best training teams that I've ever seen. Because I think that's the important part of the culture, is that the team is number one. If the team is number one, then it doesn't matter if I spend 80% of my time with you, and it doesn't matter, because the team is the center point.
Is that typical of the line of work that you're in?
No.
You mentioned, it's interesting. I think you mentioned a while back now that, kind of people in your space who, you kind of feel like you're competing against, I guess, if you will, on Instagram. Do you see yourself as being different than the kind of other people in your line of work?
I mean, I think like if I look at all the stuff that I put on social, I would say that the quality would still be in the coaching of it and not in the movement, right? So like there's certain stuff that I just don't post because I think that it's too deep and dear to me, that if I put it out there and I try to explain it, people are probably never going to see it from my perspective. No one's ever going to be as excited about it as I am, which is fine. I think that's a good thing. But I think that the reason why the field lacks that collectivity and collaborative culture is because there are too many people with business models that have to have this justification process where it's like, why would I have a sales guy if my trainer can sell himself? Or why would I have, a trainer if the sales guy can get people in and why do I need someone like they don't need to be that good. They just need to be able to sell. Right. And I think that the reason why you don't see that as much in this industry is because if you take the academy setting, it starts from the top down. And if the guy at the top is saying, which would happen very often for both academies, if the guy at the top is saying, well, my housing staff is doing their job, you guys need to step it up, you've already created separatism. Like you're done. Like as a leader, you're done. If you have a round table as a leader and you openly say what your thoughts are and beliefs are prior to anyone else speaking, you've already cultivated that environment to bias your belief. So like every place that I've ever worked in, well, again, not currently, but every place that I've ever worked in prior to Golf and Body, when you would sit down in that round table environment, right, you would always have the guy, the leader, the boss, whatever you want to call it, he would already set the tone for the environment. And that was it. Like you're not going to get someone's honest feedback if the guy who has the potential to fire you is already telling you what he believes in. Why would I be honest if I disagree? And I think that that's why I've always granted, I've left a lot of my other companies. I've also been fired from a lot of other places I've worked at as well, because I was getting to the end of my time there already. And I was like, buddy, like, I disagree. I don't think this is how it should be. And I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying, let's sit down. Like I would tell the guy in Buffalo, I'm in the trenches. You're not. You superimpose everything, but I'm working at every location. I'm working with every trainer. I'm training over 1,000 people a week in terms of the people that come through all the locations. Like, you need to understand that if you want to know why your trainers are upset, let me tell you. It's not that you're bad at what you do. It's not like, but we can talk about this. You can look at it from your perspective and my perspective. And it was the same thing, with the academy, at both of them, for sure. People, I think that's why that aspect of in this field, it's really tough. It's really tough because for whatever reason, people want to justify that the coach does this 80% of the time and the trainer only does this 20% of the time. So the trainer should only get 20% of the pay. And I never understood that ever. But
that's not uncommon in some of the research and expert performance, in that they advocate, or at least some advocate, that one should look at what the actual performers on the ground are doing instead of necessarily the prescribed commonplace. So yeah, you're definitely spot on. If you're on the boots on the ground, so to speak, you probably have a better insight into what's actually happening and what leads to improvement.
Yeah.
So if I'm not mistaken, you're considered one of the top trainers there are as far as ranking.
Yeah. Golf Digest put out a list in January with their top 50 in America. And it was awesome. I was able to get on that list. And so that was great.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thanks.
Was there that obvious acknowledgement for your ability? Was there ever a point that you started to feel as if you were approaching that type of recognition or ranking? Like, do you feel that you're that strong of a trainer?
It's tough because I've been asked that question before, and I don't really follow many other trainers. It's just like on Instagram and like through my own connections. I don't message I didn't prior to the list, I wouldn't have messaged the top 50 and been like, wow, like, how do I do what you do? And that's not because I didn't see value in that. I think I've always been someone to kind of stay in my own lane. And I've always I felt in my mind that I've always gotten kickback for my style of training and the stuff that I do. And that was especially present in the latter half of my time with the academy, which motivated me even more to put stuff on social, which was part of the reason why, one, I got the job at Golf and Body, was, my Instagram was all golf up to that point. And two, it was as expressed to me by the people who make the decision, it was a huge factor as to why I was considered for the list. Was, I had and it had nothing to do with my following. My following has gotten bigger now. When I was, I guess, picked, I only had like 1,200 followers. So it wasn't like I had like 10,000 followers and things like that. Like, but my stuff on there was, I felt very genuine to how I trained. Like, I wasn't on there just trying to put stuff out there to chase likes and views, stuff that looked good or had cool it was raw footage. Like, it's me on a windy range, like trying to talk, and it doesn't look good, but I would always put a lot of time into how I would break it down and what I would write and the stuff that I would say. And yeah, I think that was a big factor of it. But no, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I don't know if I sit there and say, yeah, you know what, I'm definitely a top 50.
Can I ask you a two-part question? Would you go as far as to consider yourself a disruptor? And then also, how did you go about developing your newer techniques or the things that you were getting kicked back on?
Yeah, I think I'm a disruptor for sure. I don't think actively. I think at times there was definitely spite behind it. But I think just naturally there's a disruptive tendency in terms of the ebb and flow of an industry and then what I try to do. And then your second question again?
How did you go about developing the techniques that you said you were getting the pushback for?
Results. I think, like I was actually on a call the other day with someone, and then they very appropriately stated, like, a lot of people haven't been able to work in performance in an environment, mainly at the academy. This is present in Golf and Body, but this is really present at the academy. Not many people have been able to work in performance in an environment where you could facilitate real-time training with real-time change. So my job, like Kevin, my job in the academy was, if a coach came up to me and said, this kid struggles with pressure into the lead side at impact, and as a result they pull hook everything, fix it. If after I worked on them and they got over the ball and it wasn't fixed, I wasn't going to be working there anymore. So whether my stuff, because this is the big kickback I got in the latter half of my time at the academy, whether my stuff was research based or it was scientifically proven, at the end of the day, I said, well, I'm out here and they're clearly making change. So whether your science and your research can back it up doesn't really matter to me, because the stuff that I'm doing, even if I'm not saying it as articulate and direct and as scripted as possible, my stuff, it's still creating change. So in that, I think that's where I was able to build that confidence, and then also that comfortability putting my stuff out there, because I was able to see that change.
So some of your critics were wanting to go specifically by the book, it sounds like.
That's the majority of kickback I get. Yep, 100%.
Gotcha.
100%.
So what? I have this lingering question in mind, so I'm sorry, I have to go back.
Sure.
There's this one part of your story that I just find super fascinating, not just because of how you described the polygraph part of it, but you have this element of like that you were just getting into there of like autonomy and wanting that freedom to, it sounds like experiment and get better and develop your craft, all that, to produce change in people, right? But then there's this part of your story where you're going to go and work in arguably one of the probably most controlled environments ever. What was that?
It could have just been opposite day, like in my mind, but seriously, like for me, it could have been like, all right, I've tried this. It's not going to work. I'm at least going to get into an environment where I'm sacrificing autonomy for at least structure in day, pay, and time. Like I at least know that, okay, there's going to be, pay. I don't know if the pay is going to be good, but like I'm going to get benefits. Like I'm going to get a retirement. Like it's going to at least structure my day. And then from there, I can kind of create whatever chaos or find whatever chaos I want. But that's the only thing I could think of, because I've gone to that a lot. There were a lot of times, and I didn't mention this in the beginning, throughout like me, when I left high school up until maybe just before the academy, where I was thinking like, maybe I'll get into law enforcement, or attempt to get into law enforcement. Maybe I'll look at something like military. Like it would pop up very often. And I think there's a level of attraction for me with that kind of structure, because in this field, there's always this vibe that like, you're a starving artist. Like you're always going to be hungry. Like you're never getting so that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, sorry, I had to go back. I just find it fascinating, right? That all these other ways you've kind of pushed against that.
Yeah.
And then there's this one element, right, where it's like, well, let me try that hat on for size for a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was also curious, during that unhappy span, you said you would go home, and I think you alluded to it, that you would go home and read to get better during that time that you were most unhappy. But I'm curious, what led you to dive deeper instead of actively pulling away? Was it simply to pass the time while you were doing it, or did you know that you were going to stay in it long term at that point?
If I think back to my unhappiest and I was doing most of that, it was purely out of anger. Purely. I mean, I think my intent with that was, if I'm gonna get out of this environment and essentially, like, it sounds bad, but like put the person that's holding me down to shame, I need to know what I'm talking about. And if I want to advance, like, again, for me, I didn't preface this at the beginning. I did one semester of college and I was done, dropped out of college. I had no interest in it. And I knew that if I wanted to move further in the field, I was going to be competing against people with a college education. Now, whether it was applicable or not, I knew that I was going to be in that position where if I advanced in the field, I was going to have to know more than, like, the stuff that I was doing to pay my bills at the time. So I think that was part of the motivation.
So in a nutshell, you've gone from basically putting together your own education to becoming one of the top 50 trainers as far as rankings. That's quite an accomplishment.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I mean, a lot of the stuff like textbooks and research papers are a huge part of my studying now, and even then, but a lot of what I was reading, like, people in the field would understand too, but like a lot of the content that I was looking at was arbitrary as well. Like a lot of the individuals that were, a lot of the stuff that I was reading about wasn't like, you weren't like, if I went and I asked 100% of people who are in school right now to, let's say, be a physical therapist, they're not going to know about that stuff, just because it's already outside the lines. And that's what interested me.
Sure. And it sounds like you almost wanted, it's almost like Bruce Lee's mantra, if it's correctly attributed to him, take what's useful and disregard the rest.
Yeah.
So at this point, you're at Golf and Body, right? And how would you describe, I'm trying to think about not putting many words into your mouth here. How would you describe how you feel about where you're at in your career?
Well, it's an unbelievably interesting clientele and membership base. The majority of the individuals we get to work with are what I would assume, right, for you guys, be labeled as high performers. They're very successful in their fields. Some of them have fostered and built their own niche within that field, and have taken it to a level where, I mean, they can be members and are doing well for themselves. So in terms of the people I get to interact with, prior to COVID, but I got to interact with daily, that in and of itself is just incredible. The training there it's just me. Like, in my mind, I collaborate with director of sports med, and I collaborate with the golf coaches and collaborate with you, but the training, like, it doesn't need to be screened, right? I don't need to ask anyone, like, if I just do my thing, and it's great. I know for me, there's still that burning desire to continue to work with collegiate and professional level athletes for the sake of doing what I'm doing at a highly competitive level, at a level where it's like, to your point before, Kevin, with how do I feel about, like, do I feel like I'm a top 50? I mean, part of me feels like I'm not going to know that until I work with a tour pro and see how they perform. Like that's my mindset. And that's like, I went back and I think I have the piece of paper somewhere, but I went back and I wrote down like my top 5 goals when I was getting ready to leave the academy. And one of those for me is to work with professional level athlete, if not professional level players for a team or something like that, because that for me, that has nothing to do with clout and everything to do with, I need to prove it to myself. That's the main thing, is I want to know at that high of a level. Cause I go like, look, you know this, Lauren, we have some members that are freaks of players. I mean, we have some guys and I have the opportunity to work with some of those guys that are very good players. And that still does feed that need a little bit for me. But that's part of what I want to bleed in with what I'm currently doing, is I definitely want to get to that point, just to prove it to myself. No other reason.
And how much of an impact would you say that creating that list of goals, how much did that help you achieve them? Do you think that was critical?
Yeah, because I wrote it down from like the perspective of, it, like in 15 years from now, if I'm not at least striving to these, like I'm not going to, like if I settle for something else, I'm not going to be happy. Like even if I never achieve them, I just want to know that I have them to strive for. That's kind of, I guess, how I feel about it.
So that's kind of your thing in the distance to work towards, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
So if we look at you for a second to kind of build on that, if we look at you as a performer, you have jotted down these goals. What are some other things you do so that you can operate at peak performance?
Well, I mean, being like in Florida, I could actually at any point, and okay, this ties into what you were just saying about Border Patrol. At no other point in my career have I actually had a schedule that was structured. So every other place I worked, it was like, okay, we have a 5 a.m. class, you got to teach it, right? We have, you know what, you're going to have just out of nowhere, last minute, hey, we need you to go to a tournament on a Saturday. So any plans you and your fiance have, they're done. You got to go to that tournament. Now, the number one thing that I have, and I've been happy with it during COVID, but I haven't been thrilled. And I think that's what's hurting me the most, is I have had a structure and a routine for at least the past 4 or 5 months since being up here, where, I know my days, I build my day around it. I build in my workouts around it. I build in my meals around it. I build in my, and it gets a little too structured sometimes, where I'll build in my quality time with my fiance around it, which shouldn't be the case. That should just be as impromptu.
Honey, you got 5 to 5:15
yeah.
today.
No, I know. And when I first started, I kind of took that approach, and that was wrong. But again, it was a learning curve. So, because I've never had to worry about that. I mean, to be honest, when I was anywhere else, it was purely random. Like, hey, you know what? I have 2 hours on a Saturday. Let's, we'll go get dinner or whatever. So, I think routine has been big. And then something that I've found that's been super helpful for me lately has been, instead of going in with a task list for the day, has just been making the day like theming my day. So, saying, and I don't really know how else to explain it. Like, I know that we had sat down and I had gone over through a list of words what my core values are, right? And I picked my top 5, and I said, you know what, instead of saying I'm going to do this, and this that day, I would take that core value and I would apply it to the day. And I would say, okay, if my core value, like one of them was relentlessness. If I thematically put that down on a Wednesday, what are the things that I can do on a Wednesday that would fill that void, that would feed into that theme? And it's actually worked out really well. And I haven't, this past week, I haven't done it. But the past couple weeks I have been doing it. And, it's been very beneficial for me. It helps me with my workouts. It helps me with my downtime. It helps me with my quality time. And there's a lot that it's benefiting me for. So those are probably the biggest things right now, is just sticking to a routine and then having like an intent, I guess, if you will, for the day.
So you have these long-term goals, you have these kind of intense, and then the routine helps you kind of navigate the day-to-day stuff and feel like there's some order to it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What would you say you view as your keys to the success that you have had?
Even when I was thinking about switching fields, there was still, I never wavered on wanting to get, I guess it's arbitrary, but like get to the top. Like if I had taken Border Patrol, I wouldn't have, like, when I was looking at that, I wasn't just looking at Border Patrol. I was looking at the specialty branches of that. When I was thinking maybe want to do law enforcement or military, it was the same thing as well. So I never wanted to be in a generic bubble, even if it wasn't like I don't view myself ever being a CEO, but I would love to be in a supportive role to a CEO. Same thing with training, right? Like I don't necessarily, if I never trained a professional athlete, and again, at the academy, I had that opportunity. I would work with some girls that played LPGA and Symetra, but to actually work with and build a program and look at the scalability of working with that one person for the duration of a training season, haven't had that yet. But even if I never got that, I think for me, it's always been wanting to achieve that. That's been important, because it's like, it forces me to read certain things and study certain things and understand certain things and look at it from a lens of, okay, how could I even break this down more? And golf's beautiful for that, because there's tons of stuff you can break down and dive into.
So do you create sub goals, or do you just work towards the overall goal that you've set?
Well, unfortunately, the planner that I use is sitting at the office in the city. But in there, it's structured to help you write out your week, short-term goals, and long-term goals. And the short-term stuff, I've always struggled to in my mind write out something for more than like maybe a few months. Though the planner has helped with short-term stuff like growing Instagram and wanting to do certain things. But yeah, I think more of the long-term stuff is just stuff that I think about, but the short-term stuff I'll actually have now since coming up here, the short-term stuff has actually been written out and, task, you're going to get this done, check that off. And I'm finding that like my weekly stuff too is also bleeding into that as well.
What created that shift? Why now?
Well, a lot of it has to do with routine and schedule. I mean, I finally have that, so I can, if I'm going to actually go over my goals, I can build that into my schedule, so I can give it the time that it deserves. I think being in the city obviously has a certain level of energy, and training the people that we get to work with is huge. And then I think the biggest part of it is, the one thing that I think the Golf Digest thing did for me, as has the growth of my Instagram, is now the regressive aspect of going back to where I was maybe 4 years ago is more of a, well, if I fell on hard times and I had to, I could. Whereas when I was at the academy, because of how the environment was and how strict it was, there was the fear of, well, if I don't make this work, I'm either going to be doing what I've been fearful of doing for the rest of my life, or I'm going to have to switch fields. Now I feel more in my field, like I have that accreditation, which is, again, it's flattering and it's great. And I feel awkward, like saying it, like I do feel awkward saying, oh yeah, I'm a top 50, but I have that. I have the people I've gotten to network with, both professionally and within my training circle as well, that it's like, okay, now I know that this is probably the trajectory for a while. Whether it goes into other sports or not, which I would love, is to be seen. But I at least know that I have a trajectory in golf, I think, for the foreseeable future.
So it sounds like in the past, somewhat by necessity, you were focusing on what you had to lose, or trying
100%.
to not lose something, right? Versus now it sounds like you are able to shift to focusing on what you could potentially gain.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, that's definitely more of the growth focus than the regressive, the fear of like I might lose this, and now, yeah, for sure.
And what percentage of the day would you say that your goals are on your mind? Are you constantly thinking about them?
Yeah, I mean, if I like what, yeah, I mean, if I watch just mindless TV, or like if I go and like chill and like play like a video game or something, I'm not thinking about it. But if we're watching, like if Melissa and I are watching something on Netflix of like, you know, like we're watching Formula thing on Formula One, and there's one on like on this team Sunderland for soccer, that I'm still thinking about it.
Oh yeah.
I do struggle to not get it off my mind for sure.
I've actually, in launching this podcast, I've had the same experience. We would be trying to watch something that you had to follow pretty closely, and I'm like, I just missed the last 3 minutes because I'm thinking about what I have to do. But I definitely feel you there.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the things that you've learned about yourself through your journey?
Well, I mean, I think the stuff that you don't recognize, you see when you're growing up, either come out in a good or a bad way. When you get faced with like, I guess the stuff that I've gone through, like, you know, both my dad was a mailman, my mom was a mailman, mail woman, and then she became a teacher for 10 years or something like that. So again, you know, they're very hardworking individuals that they got locked into their field and they stayed. And they made a career out of it. Now they're living a good life in Florida, retired. Like, it's perfect. But, you know, when I'm a kid, I don't think I see a certain level of grit, you know, a certain level of grind. I mean, my dad, when I turned 12 or 13, he also was doing a side business on top of working in the post office for fun, not out of necessity. And, you know, I think that level of discipline that I never would have understood, you know, unless I had to go through an environment where I needed to be disciplined, it started to come out. So I think that a level of discipline showed, you know, a level of hustle showed, because like, I'm going to take right now, the present moment. You know, the reality is I just like you guys, maybe a little more so for me, but like I'm in a very hands-on field. And I can't be hands-on, and I probably can't be hands-on for another 2 months. So I've had to shift to a lot of online training. And I've been blessed to have a few members that I was training in person that have wanted to dedicate the time for themselves, you know, to be able to train online. But I've also gotten to pick up a few people through social media outlets that are in the same boat, that want to be trained. And the beauty of it is, one, it shows me that I can grind and hustle through an environment that's a massive struggle for millions.
Everybody,
And what's that?
I said everybody, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then I think that it's also showed me the aspect of, you know, of the importance of what we do, and the importance of my field, because it allows me, I mean, some people are truly unaffected by this. You know, they were already software engineers. You know, they literally at the snap of a finger could work from home and nothing changes. They're just home. But it shows me the importance of me being able to take an hour out of their day. And I look at it as, if I'm working with potentially, let's say someone I'm working with is a millionaire, right? They're successful. They've made their way up. If they can still find an hour out of their day to dedicate to exercise and movement and some kind of hobby, like you're saying, Kevin, something to disassociate from everything else from, I need to do that myself. I know I did a podcast, a month ago, with a podcast called 18 Strong. And I said the same thing in there. I said, you know, at that time, now that I've been in the city and I've had this structured schedule, I've finally started to appreciate working out. People would think that because I work in the field that I love to work out and I love to hit the gym. I don't. Most of the times I don't. I love playing sport. I love being physical, right? I love if someone's going to sit down on a row machine next to me and row. I love the competition. I could do that forever. But to actually get in the gym and work out was impossible for me, because I'm thinking of all the stuff I'm thinking about when I'm coaching somebody. I'm analyzing my own movement. I'm hyper analyzing my form. I'm thinking of all these discrepancies, and so I never really enjoyed it. But the past 4 months I have. Since COVID, I haven't. I mean, I have a row machine and all the stuff I would need in the house. But I go out and I go for a run, and I hate running, but it's like I don't think about it. So. Yeah, I think that's probably been the biggest thing over the past like 8 years for me, has been showing that like the grit, the grind, the hustle that I picked up from just seeing my dad do what he did and my mom do what she did. It makes sense now, because, you know, they've, you know, it's just like I've had no choice.
Do you feel that you've had to make any sacrifices during your journey?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not someone anyway who has the personality to want to go out on a Friday and get hammered and like, like do that kind of stuff or um but there are definitely times where like, I think most people would be like, okay, like I'm barely getting by, but I'm still going to go out and, maybe travel, or I'm going to go out and instead of working on a Saturday, I want that Saturday to be a time to get outdoors and go on the lake or go hike. A lot of that stuff I haven't, and I still don't pursue because I still think that there's a level that in my mind I need to reach before I can say, instead of taking clients on a Saturday, I'm going to go hike. That's me though. I don't think that that's right or wrong by any means. But for me, I'm still there. But throughout, like when I was in Arizona, I wanted to go mountain biking and get out in the desert and go do all of these things, but I never did it because I couldn't give up that Saturday because I had to, I didn't look, if I didn't work that Saturday, could I have still paid rent and fed myself? For sure. But I didn't feel comfortable having, $1 in my checking account. Right. So like I was like, okay, like I'm not going to go do that because I want to at least have that level of comfort, right or wrong. That's kind of where I would say that's probably been the biggest sacrifice. Yeah.
Did you have any sacrifices that you've come to regret?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think no.
Cool.
Kevin asked you before, what you thought maybe your keys to success were. How do you define success though? What's your definition?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like for me to say my keys for success, there's parts of me where I don't feel like I'm successful. So for me to define my keys for success, I wouldn't be able to answer that truthfully. I don't think I could sit here and say, these are my keys for success. Now, maybe that's because I bump myself up against someone who's like, if you were interviewing like Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan, right? And you were asking them that question, I think that they would say that and people would listen, right? If I say what I do or what I think is a part of my day, I don't think that would matter to people. So because it doesn't really matter, I don't think I would particularly be able to answer the question. That doesn't mean that I base my success off of someone else's opinion, but I do think that there's a certain, I think podcasts have taken on such a level of like, again, I think podcasts, I think of like those guys like Ferriss, Rogan,
Ferriss Tashman.
Yeah.
Path Distilled, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah. So for me, this like I'd always say, this has nothing to do with the platform and who's interviewing me, and it has everything to do with how I view myself. Like if you were Joe Rogan and asked me that question, I would be like, I don't know. I don't know what my keys to success are. Just like if it's you guys answering, asking me that question, like it has nothing to do with like me being on the Path Distilled or the Joe Rogan experience. It has everything to do with the fact that I still don't view myself as being successful. And I don't know why, but I don't.
So if you were to have a day for which you felt like you had failed, what would that entail?
I think if I didn't have time to, if like throughout that day I didn't dedicate time to my craft, and I didn't dedicate time to like if I had a day where I didn't, like that exists right now. I mean, I have some days where I don't train anybody. Again, I'm lucky where that's not every day. Maybe like excluding a Saturday or Sunday, there may be one weekday where I don't have a session right now with the way COVID and everything is. But even then, I think if I don't dedicate any time to thinking and building and studying within my field, that would be labeled as a failure for me. I mean, there are times, right? Like right now I have structured time at the end of my day where I can go and just not think, whether that's TV, a video game, a book that doesn't pertain to my field. But like if I do that, there's times where I'll come out of that and I'll be mad at myself and feel like I failed for the day because I'm like, why am I doing this if I haven't achieved X or something? So, but I think for me, a failure would be if I didn't get to do what I want. Like if I didn't do something in this field at some point during the day.
Do you see it as black and white? Is it either a succeed or a fail, or is there another option for you?
I see it as black and white, but I think that there could be a level of gray if that's being maintained with, I think the gray probably resides most on compensation, like finance. I think for me, I think I'd be okay being in the gray, maybe if the compensation's there, but otherwise it's black or white. Because I don't base, like, if I could do what any of us probably, right? But because we love what we do, but if I could do what I do for free, but I knew that like it took care of my wife and it took care of my future family, and like I'd be okay with that. So money isn't the motivator for me to get into a black or a white. But if I was gonna finally look back, like look at myself in the mirror and say I've settled, I'd at least want to know that I'm in a financially comfortable position. So I don't know if that's money driven or not, but.
And how much time per day would you say that you spend doing the thinking, building and growing? And in that, I guess, overall context, before the COVID situation, what did a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I would say that the amount of time that I spend a day would have reflected what a typical day looked like. So like an average day was usually 6:30. I would be working and in the studio from 6:30 till 5, 5:30, 6 o'clock. I mean, they were long days.
Wow.
And built into that was the importance for me of the commute. I mean, I don't go on the train and watch YouTube or, Netflix. Like I'm still working on the train. Like so for me, 14 to 15 hours is a comfortable number.
Wow. And what percentage of that would be research?
If it's a normal work day, I'd say half. Half. I'd probably, if I'm including if I'm looking at a 16-hour workday, including transportation, I probably have 8 sessions in that day, 8-9 sessions in that day. So there wasn't much downtime.
Is that time that you spend doing that born out of feeling like you have to because you're not good enough, because you're interested in doing it, because you want to continue to develop your craft, a combination?
Right now it's because I want to, and because I still want to get further in the field. This is the first time since I've been in the field where, and again, I'm going to speak from the aspect of no COVID, like normal workday. All of my studying and research was purely done out of want and excitement for what the future has.
Nice. Was
that shifting into working for Golf and Body, or was there something else that created that kind of evolution in you?
Well, I think the big factor of it was Golf and Body, and then also the networking and connections I'm getting on social, specifically through Instagram. There's a big factor of that I think builds that level of autonomy, where it's making me want to study more and network more and grow more, for sure.
And prior to that, you did it because?
Again, probably a 6 or 7 month peak when I was at the academy. It was done for the same reasons I'm feeling now. But the majority of it in the past was I felt driven on spite and anger, wanting to get ahead just to kind of look back and know that I've gotten past that person.
That's sometimes underrated.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So what advice would you give an aspiring performer in both golf and in your position training?
If they're young, diversification as much as possible. And I would never dissuade someone from college or pursuing higher education. I would just make sure that it's like, I was listening to a really interesting interview with, I don't know if you guys know who Peter Attia is, but he's a medical doctor, has a pretty popular podcast now. And he even said that if he was speaking to an aspiring medical student, that he would tell them to not go to school for medicine, but to go to school for something else. I think that if I was talking to like a 17-year-old, not version of me, but if I was talking to a 17-year-old aspiring in the field, I would be like, if you're going to go to school to be in the field, go for something that requires a degree like athletic training or physical therapy, or you want to be a chiropractor. But if you're going to go for exercise science or kinesiology or exercise phys, I would look at trying to maybe spend a year or two in the field in as many different places, working for as many different training environments as possible, just to know that, when I was in Arizona and I was working with other trainers, I was working with college graduates that were, again, like they would come up to me and be like, well, we didn't learn that in school. I'm like, that's because I didn't learn it from school. Like that doesn't, to me, that's okay. Like, again, I'm never going to rag on, it's probably the biggest conversation that my fiance and I have, because she's a college graduate who doesn't want to work in the field that she graduated in. I'm not a college graduate who's pejoratively thriving, I guess, right, in the field that he didn't go to school for. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to tell our kids to not go to school. That's never going to be the case. But I would say diversify as much as you can, because I think that in this field, it's really important, because you got to be a people person too. You have to.
I mean, that's such an interesting conversation now, right, on the heels of David Epstein's book Range, right, and that notion of, do you specialize or generalize, diversify, right, and the commentary around that. Do you feel like you chose that path, or you stumbled upon it and learned that was the quote unquote good path?
Well, I think when I sat down with, I guess it would have been like a counselor at the college, just someone who was in academic, like in the like just helping me with selecting classes for my next semester and stuff like that. I can't think, but like when I sat down with him and I made the decision, I looked at him, I said, you can take me off the list. I'm not going to be coming back next semester. This is before I even spoke to my parents or anything. I made that decision. I think that's at that moment was when I said, okay, I'm either going to follow a trend and I'll still find a way to make it work for me, or I'm going to do with what feels right in my gut. Because that was probably next to knowing that I was going to marry the person that I was dating, right? That was probably the only other time in my life where I was like, I know that if I make this decision, I'm going to have no regrets at all. It's going to be a different road. It may be not the most traditional and comfortable or what I would want, but I know that this is the right decision. And then that sparked again, out of anger and out of spite, but it sparked my snowball into like where I am now.
So was it a direct link? Did you know when you were leaving college that was the next step of your path, or did it just kind of happen a little bit after?
What's happening now? Did I know that was going to be a result of that?
Yeah. So when you told the advisor that you were leaving, did you know at that point that you were going to make a career out of training?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I went, my selected major was athletic training.
Okay.
And I was never good in school to begin with. And when I had finished my gen eds for the first semester, and I sat down and he started showing me what my options were for the next couple of years, and none of it had anything to do with anything in my field. There was nothing along the lines of anatomy or physiology. I saw the next couple of years were not pertaining to what I wanted to do. That's when I knew that I was like, okay, well, I'm going to spend the next few years at least trying to get experience in my field before I decide to maybe go to school for business, if that's the only route that I have.
And was there a moment that you knew that it had taken, in the sense that you were on the path was now in motion, that you were in motion on the path, I guess?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think once I had gotten the golf cert and gotten out to Arizona, that's when I knew that, like, okay, this is the beginning of it, because I was working with people again who were where I would have been, 4 years from that moment, which was with a degree and curious, like, where am I going to work now? Because I met a lot of people that were unbelievably intelligent and did very well in school, but part of this field is communication, and they were never taught how to communicate. Me, I didn't have a choice. If I'm running a class of 50 people in Buffalo by myself, or I'm running a class of 25 people in Arizona by myself, which came prior, I mean, I had to learn how to communicate first. So the ability to communicate to not only one person, but to a group of people, but to be able to teach them one thing, but to know that if I'm teaching Lauren it this way, but I'm gonna have to teach it you, Kevin, another way, then I also have to address everyone as a whole, plus I have to address that person as an individual. It really taught me how to communicate. And I think that's been a huge part of what's benefited me throughout the field, has been that aspect of communication.
And at what point during your learning curve, and because you mentioned specific or personalized plans for the individual, was there a steep learning curve on the ability to do that, or do you think it came pretty easily? Was that pretty early in your career?
So yeah, I think if I'm working with just Gen Pop, it's that came on pretty early. because it was pretty straightforward. You know, someone comes in, you test them, you see they have back pain, you follow, you know, and you do the things you got to do to train them. In golf, that definitely took probably until the beginning of my second year with after a full 12 months at the academy, I was firing on all cylinders for sure. And I finally felt good in that field.
And in that first year, did you ever feel that you were faking it as you were learning it?
Well, because I never played golf, and I understood the swing anatomically. I didn't understand it technically, for sure. I mean, for sure, when coaches or students were talking about pull hooks, or they were talking about even just playing, like I had to definitely, you know, fake it for sure.
Are there times
I was very comfortable with that.
Are there times where you still feel like that? Do you feel now like there are times?
I think there's still some lingo and stuff like that where, like, I mean, like, I definitely know that. I mean, I don't know. I would think that if someone followed my Instagram, maybe listened to me on a podcast and saw the stuff that I was doing, there's still hesitancy for me to openly express my educational background. Because maybe I'm wrong, but I think coming in, there's a level of assumption. And it depends on who I'm speaking with you guys, speaking with the individual that I had to work with at the second academy that we merged with. I'm already done. I'm discredited. What I do doesn't matter. But for me now, I don't care. Like then it was a little bit more of like, okay, like I still have to prove. For me, if someone comes up to me, you know, you're out of college, you know, you're a college dropout, you don't really have that background, I'm not going to trust you. Say, fine, go find somebody else. Like, I'm okay with that. That's fine with me.
What allowed you to get to that place?
I don't like to say it, but I do think that Instagram has been a part of that, in the sense that it works as an active, you know, living resume. And I definitely think the Golf Digest thing's been good. It wasn't a requirement, you know, to be pulled on the list. So I think that, and then at the end of the day, if I'm in person with someone who wants to make that statement, I 100% trust my ability to help them see the change that they want, regardless of whether they want to believe it or not. Because of my background, I trust my ability to coach over social presence and any accredited accolade. I 100%, I'm always going to be a show me, don't tell me kind of person. And that's something that I will live with, I think, forever. Is, you know, if someone comes up to me and say, hey, I want to intern with you. I'm a college graduate, but I know nothing of golf, but I think I can be really good. I'm always going to fall back on you don't have to sit there and tell me about what your GPA was. And if you were, you know, summa cum laude, I don't care about any of that. If you can show me, that's what matters. And that may be a little bit of a negative bias, but that's where I'm always going to deviate towards, for sure.
I like it. So what percentage of what you're able to accomplish would you attribute to the hard work and the steps that you've taken versus being a, quote, natural?
I think in terms of my ability to, I would say in terms of my ability to demonstrate and articulate and show movement. Like if I'm coaching somebody, to show position and to show what I want them to feel, and the ability to show them through myself, I think is just a natural thing. I think I can move naturally well. I wasn't obviously not a high-end athlete. I didn't play competitively in high school, and I obviously didn't play collegiate, but I am an athletic person. So I think that genetically helps. But I would have to attest the rest of it towards just hard work and discipline, for sure.
And what percentage would you attribute to the people that you train? What have you noticed? Is it which is more important, or how would you allocate the importance, I guess?
In terms of like my ability of hard work against talent?
Yeah, for the people that you're actually working with, so the other individuals.
I would say that leans more heavily on hard work, because I think a lot of what I'm doing with people comes down to being able to get them to feel something in a way that they understand it. And I don't think that there's a single certification or educational institute that I've followed that has been able to teach that. I think a lot of that's more psychological and more understanding of personality and emotion and thought than it is of anatomy. I think for me, maybe this falls into the natural category. I think the anatomy part of it is natural, but the ability to talk to somebody and get them to understand something that, because again, I get it a lot in my field. Someone's like, I've worked with a golf coach for 2 years and they haven't been able to get me feel that. And you don't teach golf, but you've been able to get me feel that. I think that has a lot to do with hard work. Like, because I don't feel comfortable in a session if I'm not getting to that. I could sit there and talk about anatomy. And I think if someone came up and said, hey, I have left back pain when I swing the club, what do you recommend? And I think I could fix it. Like that. Like, that's easy. To me, that feels easy. But to actually take somebody through a complete change like that, I don't enjoy my coaching if I'm not getting to that end result, for sure.
And of course, that's our big interesting question, and the thing fueling really this podcast is that understanding of, are we born with these capabilities, or do we develop them over time, or is it a combination of both, and what does that trajectory look like? So would you, kind of looking at it through that lens, would you then say that your skill and abilities as a trainer, you unlocked potential that you just were born with or naturally had, or that you've worked through your hard work and the things that you've done and the journey that you've gone on, that's how you've arrived at this point and your capabilities?
I would say it was unlocked, and it falls back to that day I sat with my advisor 100%, because I think at that moment I made that decision to say, I'm going to potentially go for 10 years, 15, I don't know how long, but I'm definitely going to go through the better half of my 20s, having to give up weekends and having to give up time with friends and family, and having to give up, the reality of being a broke college student. But I'm a broke college student, so I'm going to still go out and do things that broke. Like I gave that up because I wanted to see what was going to be at the end of this. If I made the decision to stay, again, I don't look back at life with regret, so I don't think I would have regretted that. But I think that I would not be in the position I'm in right now if that were the case.
Is there anything that we haven't asked that you feel is important to share?
I don't think so. I don't usually do a good job talking about myself unless someone asks a question. So I think on my end, I'm good.
And then what would you say is the biggest takeaway overall from your story?
I think for me, it's to always be willing to take in as much info as I can, and to look at it from as many different perspectives as possible. Like, that's why I struggle in religious and political debates, because I'm not gonna lean a certain way because I feel like I have to. I'm gonna see things from as many different ways as I can. And I think that the willingness to not be afraid to commit to a complete level of unknown at a young age. So look, if in 2 or 3 years time I have a kid, and things change in terms of my options and what I can do, but I think that's part of life. At 19, 20, 21, 22, at 26, I think that there still has to be that level of, like, I'm going to commit to something that just doesn't make sense. I think there's too much structure in being like, you have to go to A to B to C to D to E. So I think being understanding that there's always an A and always a Z, but you don't have to go B to C to get there. I think for me is probably my biggest thing is just embracing as much as I can, and following what I think feels right. And that's always the hard part, because I think people, myself included, juxtapose that against what people say you should do. But that's probably been my biggest thing for sure.
So Matt, given your takeaway, I understand you gave us an image that meant something to you. So can you tell us a little bit about what this is and what it means?
Yeah. So I came across this photo probably 4 or 5 years ago. It was just something I came across on Instagram. And when I saw it, it resonated with me because, you know, I think it reflects, regardless of the quote, I think it reflects just a lot of kind of how I feel when I look at certain situations. So the quote at the bottom does say, all you need in this life is ignorance and confidence, and then success is sure. And I think that that quote itself tied in with the photo because when I saw it, I was like, all right, you know, you have clearly unfavorable conditions, right? It's snowing out, it's cold. There's, to me, it looks like there's just a look in the photo of preparation for something. And for me, there's a level of seriousness, but then there's also a level of, I guess you could say, enjoyment or excitement for what's about to happen. And I think that when I saw the photo, I was like, okay, like that resonates. And then when I added the quote to it and I came across the quote, that's when I realized that there's such a strong relationship, I think, between ignorance and confidence because, you know, for me, going back on my story, when I was making the decisions that I was making for my career path, you know, I knew that the decision to go against the grain was and could be labeled as ignorant. I'm being ignorant towards what's worked for people, ignorant towards what people suggest, ignorant towards suggestions of maybe friends or family or other people that have, you know, made it in quotes and, you know, in the field. And I was okay with that because I think I had the confidence that even if I didn't get to where other people thought I could have or should have, or, you know, I wasn't doing the same that other people were doing, I was confident that if I was making a decision and executing on a decision that resonated with me, that I couldn't really go wrong. So even if it wasn't this life that I may have thought, if I looked back and said, okay, like I made the right decision then, and even though it was against what everyone else was doing, I was confident in that decision to go against everyone else, I think was just really, really, you know, impactful for me. And then, you know, just the smirk and kind of the just environment of the photo, it all kind of, it tied in really well for me. And I've had it on my wall for, I don't know, 5 years now. So it's been a big part for sure.
And is this an approach that you would recommend to others, or is it one that is best suited for you?
I think I would recommend it. I mean, it was definitely it is and was suited for me, but I would recommend it to somebody else if they're at a point where everybody is telling them to not do something, but they feel that what they want to do is right for them. It's the decision that they want to make. It resonates with them. It's something that's genuine and authentic to how they're feeling. Then you do it, and you don't really worry about, you know, you can't be ignorant, in my opinion. You can't be ignorant to something that you don't particularly agree with anyway. You know, for me, it's obviously there are, you know, there's good and bad, and you have to know that regardless of doing something, it's the right or the wrong thing to do. But if you're kind of in that middle part, then you got to go with your gut. And I think that, you know, if that's the position you're in, it's the way to go.
Awesome.
So having this on your wall and having it be there for several years is something that allows you to remember. It sounds like kind of having this focal point for yourself.
Yeah, it's always been positioned in an area where I either saw it coming in and out of the house, or I would see it first thing in the morning. So it's coming in and out of my room, or it was coming in and out of the house. At one apartment I was in, I had it where I would do my workouts. So it was, you know, it was in an area where I saw it, I remembered it. You know, it was always kind of getting me ready for the day.
Awesome. Well, it was really awesome having you on our show today. And really cool to hear some different parts of your story. Even knowing you, Matt, and working with you at Golf and Body a bit, like there are some things today that were just new and really cool to hear what that has done, you know, for you and your journey and helped you get to this place.
Yeah, I really I mean, I think this was awesome. I think you guys have a great format, and this is going to be what a lot of people need, you know, to understand. Like, again, nobody cares about me, but to be able to look at people that are successful and understand what they did to get to where they are. I think there's not enough out there in terms of that directness. You know, it sometimes comes up naturally, I guess, but like this is the fact that that's the intent behind this, I think is awesome.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for being with us.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
Thank you. The Path Distilled is hosted by Kevin Harris and Lauren Tashman, created and produced by Kevin Harris. The content is copyrighted by The Path Distilled, all rights reserved.